All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today for today's Lunch and Learn. We're super excited to have Bobbi Howe with us. Bobbi Howe you're in St. Joe, right? Is that right
Yep.
outside of, okay.
Yep.
In St. Joe, Missouri. I'm assuming right outside of Kansas City.
Yep. If you've watched Ozark, when they start talking about the casino in Northwest Missouri, that's right here.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. All right. That's
That's
good to
here.
know. That's awesome. That's good to know. Awesome. Thanks for that.
There's
So
your
now,
fun fact of the day.
exactly. There you go. You just gave us something to relate us to. So, Bobbi, tell us a little bit about yourself. Basically, I've given you, a little bit of a introduction as far as you were born in this industry, correct?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got into this industry when I was 8 years old. My mom was a single parent and I was an only child. So I started going on every listing, every showing, everything essentially. When
Okay.
I was 10, I started writing her contracts for her because she would put a closing on Sunday or she'd misspell refrigerator. And I was a smart ass 10-year-old and I'd be like, that's wrong. So one day she goes, if you're so smart, why don't you write my contract? And I was like, all right. And I wrote a perfect contract. So after that, I was in charge of writing all of her contracts and doing all of her marketing. And this is way back 32 years ago. And so back in the day, a property flyer, you'd go take a photo with film with a regular camera. You'd get the film developed, then you'd pick the photo you wanted. You get a bunch of actual copies of that actual photo. You would glue stick it to a piece of paper because we didn't have color copiers back then. And you take your
Okay.
business card and you'd glue stick it to the piece of paper, and that's how you'd make a flyer for a property. So
Wow. So
I've
Bobbi,
seen a lot of
you've seen technology change pretty dramatically, huh?
a little bit. So
Awesome.
command is totally a whole new world. And I'm like, where was this 30 years ago? So yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, our worlds would be a lot different.
Yes,
All
they
right,
would.
so Bobbi, you grew up. So obviously you're growing up, and then walk us through what happened. When did you like get into the business full time?
I have to say hi to Shoes. Shoes is here. My day is made. Yay, Shoes. He's here. So essentially, I was always in the business. I didn't have a choice. On my 18th birthday, I got my license just so that I could hold open houses and do all those things that my mom had wanted me to do, but that I couldn't do, essentially. I went to college. I did all that, but I still had my real estate license during that time. Then when I got out of college, some stuff happened with my husband's job. We went to Columbia, Missouri for a while, and then some stuff happened with his job. We ended up back in St. Joe, and I worked for a title company for a while. They started me over in the title department, and after about a week, they're like, "We need you in the escrow department. You should be doing closings. You know these people, do the settlement statements." And I worked in the closing department for about 3 years. And then in about a 1 month time frame, my mom had 3 different assistants or buyer's agents leave her team, and she needed me to come back. And I resisted and didn't want to do it. And yet, as an only child, I was the only one that she could rely on. So I went back to work for her. And that was back in 2005. And we worked together until 2011. And at that time, she had developed some severe alcoholism. We went to show a church property to a pastor one day. And from the distance from me to past where my laptop is right now, I could smell alcohol in her breath. And we went outside and we had a conversation afterwards, and she completely denied it. And this was not the first incident, but it was the last one for me. And I decided I was too young in my career to be labeled just as Nancy's daughter, the alcoholic's daughter. And so I went off on my own and joined a different company. And as the story goes, I did really well. And then about a year into that, I had a son. And so it was amazing. It was fun. I had taken a whole lot of time off, and I had him in late September. So I took off the rest of the year. And it was early February of 2013. It was the Monday after the Super Bowl. Was my first day back to work. I'd gone into the office that day. I was setting out my plan, my marketing plan. One of the first things I had that day was I had a Realtor of the Year sales meeting that I had to go to at our board office. So I went down there. My mom should have been at the meeting because she was a past recipient as well, but she wasn't. Wasn't unusual for my mom to miss committee meetings. So I go, I do my thing. As I'm leaving, I get a call from my my stepdad that said my mom had taken her life. And in that moment, everything changed. I had a 4-month-old little boy, and she had not seen him since Christmas Eve. And earlier that day, she had sent me a text saying, when can I come see Alex? And I said, well, my first response was, I picked up my phone and I threw it down and I said, F you, B, because I was mad. She hadn't seen him since Christmas Eve. I'd been begging her to see him. It's my first day back in the office. I'm trying to get my real estate career going again. And now she wants to intrude on my time. What I responded back to her was, anytime. I will make time for you anytime you want to see this Alex, my son, and we'll do that. And then a few hours later, I get that call. I questioned this industry. I questioned whether I should stay in it. I questioned my place in it. And for the next year and a half, I became a virtual assistant for a lot of top realtors across the country. Lee Brown from Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't really know Tommy then, but I was kind of dealing with Tommy a little bit. Scott Pinella out of Louisville, Kentucky. Brian Copeland, Maura Neal, agents like that. I was their virtual assistant for a while still doing just a little bit of real estate. It was about a year into that, someone from Keller in Kansas City approached me up in St. Joe and said, what do you know about Keller? And I said, well, you all drink Kool-Aid, and that's all I know. You're a cult and you drink Kool-Aid. That's all I knew.
Right.
And he's like, well, that's really funny, but here. And the one thing he showed me was a training calendar for the market center. And it was what he didn't know about my story was the last 2 companies I was with, I had begged for more training. I actually said, I will train the agents. You don't have to pay me any money. I want to train our agents. Both companies have said, Bobbi, we don't do that. We sell leads to our agents. We don't need to train them how to go get their own leads. And I was like, fast forward a few months later, I became a team leader of a 500 agent market center in North Kansas City. And I did that for about 4 years. That's how I know shoes.
That's how you know shoes in the myth, the legend. Okay.
Yep.
And then Bobbi,
what that experience, the reason I chose to do it is it gave me a chance to talk one-on-one with agents so that I could teach them things that my mom had never been taught. I could have conversations with them that no one ever had with my mom. When I started, and I'm not Kellerizing this, even though I have my letters up there. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. Maybe I am. It was something I had never seen in this real estate industry before. And it's something that I wish my mom had experienced, because I think the story I'm about to tell you, some of the things I'm going to talk to you, they're Y4C2Ts, they're bold laws. They're things we talk about every day, and they're common sense things, but sometimes agents need to be reminded of them. And so that's what I think is just so, it's why I am where I am. And it's why I'm who I am right now. Yeah.
Well, Bobbi, first and foremost, thanks for being so strong. I mean, that's obviously a very emotional and crazy story, right? Yeah. If we could take a couple steps back, when you said that you basically had to break up with your mom as business partners, how difficult was that? Like, I mean, we get worried about like, switching companies, or we get worried about, our partnerships or something like that, or losing a seller, but actually breaking up with a business partner who's your mother, how difficult was that?
It was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my entire life. I had reached my breaking point. I didn't know when it was going to happen, what I was going to do. I'm highly involved with the National Association of Realtors. That year I'd gone away to the mid-year meetings in DC. And I had decided during that week that when I came home, I was going to go in. I got home like on a Saturday afternoon, and Sunday night, I was just going to go in and I was going to clean out my office and just leave a note, because I didn't know how to do it face to face. My mother and I had a very volatile relationship, as you might imagine, something like this happening. And maybe I was a chicken, maybe whatever. I just knew my level of what I could deal with. And that was and I wrote her notes of how to do everything, because I had done everything for so long. Yeah. I mean, my mom was that person who would call me like when the power went out and the VCR time went off, like, how do I reset the time on my VCR? She literally didn't know how to do anything other than pick up the phone and generate a lead. My mom was amazing at doing that. Everything else was that. So I wrote a long note. She wrote me off for a while, but I had lived my life, and Shoes knows this about me, because he's KPA'd me, is that my big thing is disappointing people. I graduated high school as a salutatorian. I graduated college cum laude with honors. And yet when I was 21 years old, my mom looked me in the eye and said, "You've never been anything but a disappointment to me." And so knowing that I was who I was, and yet I could still disappoint this human being, it messes with your psyche a lot. And so I do a lot of telling myself, even to this day, I'll catch myself doing something and then being like, that's not accurate. That's a story you're telling yourself right now, and stop it, because it's not true.
Bobbi, we've talked a lot on these calls about mindset.
Yes.
I mean, holy cow, did you have to keep a very positive and strong mindset? Was it something that you had in your life always? How did you work on it? How did it become where it is today?
For me, it was survival. How do I survive? Because a part of the story that I didn't tell is that when my mom was 12 years old, she grew up on a dairy farm, and she was walking out to the barn to do something. I forget what she was doing. And she found her father, and he had taken his life as well. Okay. And so knowing that my grandfather had done that, knowing my mom had done that, I had to find a purpose to my life that was greater than anything and everything, and change the cycle. So for me, and one of the things my husband had been begging me for years to do, and my husband and I were getting ready to celebrate next week our 23-year anniversary. So he's seen me grow and change over the years, but he had begged for years for me to go to counseling, and I was always like, man, that's not for me. That's not for me. Yeah. And finally, after everything with my mom happened, he's like, will you go to counseling now? And going to counseling and realizing that some of the things that, the pointing the finger, 3 go back at you, I had a lot of 3 going back at me. And it helped me take some of that stuff that I was telling myself was a story that wasn't truth. Right. And so counseling was huge for me. And I think we've started to cross that line where it's not stigmatized the way that it was, but I still think it's hard to create the time in your schedule, make yourself a priority so you can do that. I can still to this day, I'm a marathon runner. I can go create a priority to get up in the morning, to go run, to eat the right foods. I can do a lot of things creating priority. But when it comes to creating time to talk about my issues, and that's a different priority that I think is really hard for a lot of us to do. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And Bobbi, I know your history here a little bit, and especially being a team leader, you coach a lot of people. What's what's the correlation between the therapy and the coaching?
I think to a certain extent that me coaching other agents is in effect a therapy for myself.
Therapeutic for yourself, right?
Yeah, because the one thing that I see, and it's one of my points that I have in my as I do a 1-hour keynote on lessons from the other side. And one of the things that I talk about, actually a couple of them, number 1 is stop judging. And we all know this is spelled off. Don't judge your insides by someone else's outsides. And too often we sit and look and see that, oh, look at Joe. Joe's amazing. Look at all the success he's having. All he has to do is wake up and his phone is ringing with all these clients that want to list their house and buy their house. And me, I can't get a lead to save my life. And yet you don't see the other side. You don't see the iceberg illusion. You just see the success of what's above the water. You don't see the other things below the water, all the determination, all the persistence, all the failure that we do. And when you coach one-on-one with agents, you get to see that other side. You get to see the thing that's below the water, not the thing that's above the water that everybody else sees. And the other part of this is the struggle is real. And I know that sounds trite and I know that sounds dumb, but whenever we all stop to become vulnerable and more transparent and say, I'm hurting, I'm not okay, most of the time people rally to us and say, oh, thank God, I'm not okay either. I'm hurting also. And when we're able to have, and that's one of the things I love about coaching. It's the one of the things I love about one-on-one conversations. I love my time as being a team leader. I loved running team meetings and having mini real estate conferences and throwing all this stuff out. But my favorite part was meeting one-on-one with agents, whether they were agents looking to join us or whether it was my own agents, because we could become vulnerable and transparent. I mentioned this to you on the call yesterday, Joe. My mom's story is a lot like that of the Robin Williams story or the Kate Spade story or Anthony Bourdain. Though he had demons, you could see his demons. But take, for instance, Robin Williams. He was a comedian, for crying out loud. He made other people laugh, and yet he was struggling on the inside because he couldn't be vulnerable and transparent. My mom was the #1 agent in our community for over 15 years. She didn't feel she could be vulnerable and transparent with the struggle she was actually having. She just put on this happy face. When everything happened, it happened at her home, and I rushed out there, and we get out to her house, and I'm talking to the coroner wanting to know if they're going to do an autopsy to see if we could have, see if her antidepressants she'd been taking them. And her husband looked at me and he said, what antidepressants?
Oh man.
And I was like, she has like 2-gallon Ziploc bags of drugs. She has a whole bunch of antidepressants. We go into their house. They had his and hers bathrooms, so they didn't share a bathroom space. And we go in and we literally pulled out, I think it was like 75 different antidepressants that she had just in her bathroom.
Yeah.
He didn't even know. The greater community as a whole, they had no idea that this was a part of my mom's story. And there were people that called the local FBI agent and accused my stepfather of murder, because how could Nancy ever take her life? She wasn't that way. She was a happy person. She was at the top of her game. And yet, because we won't become vulnerable, because we won't become transparent, that never came out. People didn't see that in her story.
So Bobbi, you saw that bold law firsthand, right? I'm assuming you're on being the number one agent out there. Everyone was like, oh, if I could just be like Nancy, right? You know, if I could just be like Nancy, my life's better. And she was struggling inside.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was the one person in her life who knew that this was most likely the way her life was going to end, though I hoped that it wouldn't. And I certainly didn't think it was going to happen at the time that it did happen. Even to me, it seemed like everything was starting to go right in her life. She'd been married to her husband for 2 years. She was finally on a farm with 28 acres. They had just built a horse barn. She was getting a few horses. You know, all these things she'd wanted for a long time were finally starting to happen. And yet something happened that day. She didn't leave a note. We don't know. We found 7 empty bottles of vodka in the trash, and this all happened about 11 a.m. So what happened, I will never know. And yet I think there was so much pressure on her to keep performing at the top of her game, because all eyes were looking at her. You know, we go to real estate conferences, we go to trainings, and we're taught, sell more real estate, do this, do that, get more leverage, get more leads. But we don't take the time to talk to agents about the emotions in this business. And you can have the highest of highs and lowest of lows in about 5 minutes in this industry. You know, you can get that $1.5 million deal together, and then a second later, somebody's like, I'm out of it, you know, or whatever it is. Right. In my market, a $1.5 million deal is a big deal. But you can have those, and we don't.
It's still here too, Bobbi. It's still here too.
Okay. Our average sales price in my town's 130. So
all right. Yeah. Okay.
It's a little different, but you understand. But we don't tell agents how to deal with the stress. We just go get more business, just keep going. Well, sometimes you have to stop. You know, one of the things that I teach agents is work-life balance is a misnomer. We're at a place in our society where everybody, I want work-life balance. Life doesn't work that way. There are very few times in your life that work and life are going to be balanced at the same time. There's a lot of time in your life that's going to be extremely work heavy. And if you want to be a successful real estate agent, you have to make it work heavy. You have to go put the work in. But too often, top producers, especially high D people, they get driven by that and they forget to take time for the life side of their life. You know, it's like we need the Staples easy button. We need a pause button just to stop, and agents won't do that. Well, what we have right now with stay in place and everything going on, and you guys have stay in place for another month, Missouri's supposedly opening back up on Monday. I don't see how that's possible at this point, whatever. But we need to look at what we have now, and we've been given, it's all in your mindset, we've been given a gift of life right now. We've been given a gift of time with our family, time to educate ourselves, time to step away from the work. And I'll get to the money piece here in a minute. But view it for the gift that it is. And then when things open back up, it's time to go to work again.
Right.
But you have to keep remembering that whenever I'm having the life side of my life, work is going to suffer, and that's okay. And when I'm working really hard, my life is going to suffer, but that's okay, because I'm going to take time for it later, as long as you take time for it later.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's very powerful. So Bobbi, you believe, to take a quick step back, you believe, you know, Gary Keller has said to myself in a training room one time, he said, there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's counterbalance, right? You know, so you're a big advocate as that as well. And how do you live your life with that, you personally?
So for me personally, like I said, I was team leader of a 500 agent market center for almost 4 years. It was a very, very work heavy time for me, quite frankly. The stress that it put on me and my life and my health and my family. And quite frankly, it came down to a conversation where my husband said, you've got to choose either the market center or you've got to choose your family, because basically you've become an a-hole. And I was, because I am 100% D, 92% I. I'm a very driven individual. I threw myself into my market center, and my family suffered during that time. And for the first year or two, it was fine. We were okay. We were still finding that proper counterbalance. But at one point, the stress became too much. And so I stepped away from it. And basically all of last year, I travel and I do, I speak on mental health now. I speak, teach a lot of other concepts to non-Keller agents. I teach them Keller concepts, but they don't know that's what they're being taught.
They don't know. Yeah.
It's fun. I love it. They don't even know they're being Kellerized. It's good. Anyways, I travel and speak at real estate conferences, and I sell some real estate here and there. However, I had not thrown myself back into real estate, and I allowed myself last year to just have time with my family. For the first time, my son last summer was 6 years old. For the first time in 6 years, I was able to be home with him all summer long during summer school while he was off from school. And that was such an amazing thing. Now, most people aren't going to be able to go 4 years heavy in the trenches, 1 full year off. Most people can't do that. And I go to extremes. I get that. There's a better way to counterbalance that. However, that's how I did it. And I took the year off, and actually was mid-February, I'd started pushing my real estate career heavy again. And then now COVID has shown up, and it's like, you know what? That's a sign from the universe. Maybe I wasn't quite ready to go full blast. I still have enough money in the bank account. It's okay. I can enjoy my family some more. And I'm loving doing what I am right now. There's a little bit of work, there's a little homeschool, and there's a whole lot of love on my son.
Hey, Bobbi, you know, because you're very educated on this and you talk all around the country, mental health right now is being talked about a lot. I was on a conversation with one of my friends today, and he, and again was like, hey, how do the current environment, do you see people being testy, or like what's going on? What's your take on this? How do you think people are going to come out of this, stay at home in a good mental health state?
I think that a lot of people are going to struggle coming out of this in a mental health state. And I think it's going to have us having a lot more conversations like this so that people can put their mindset right. Because when you're in the middle of something, it feels like it's always going to be that way. And I hate using superlatives, always and never. However, when you're at the height of your game, you don't always stay at the height of your game. At some point in time, age, whatever, you start to come down your game. I'm thinking Jordan was at the height of his game. And yet there are things he could not control that allowed him to not stay at the top of his game. When you're at the bottom and you're in the depths of despair, it's not always going to be that way. You're going to come back up. You're going to spend most of your time in the middle. Yet whenever you're going through something, especially really tough, it feels like that's all there's always ever going to be. And it's never that way. It always changes. However, if your mindset tells you that this is how it's always going to be, you're never going to go find that thing. But if you tell yourself, okay, I'm at the worst, but this is just a temporary thing we're passing through, and then you work hard, you can get yourself out of this. But we're going to see a lot of people struggling to come out of this. I'm seeing the reports of a bunch of EMTs and ER doctors that are taking their lives during this time, especially out in New York City, because New York City was inundated so horribly bad that I think that as things start to improve and change and do whatever, we're going to see a new wave of, not necessarily COVID, but a new wave of depression as people lose jobs or things change. This is a bigger conversation we need to be having more often.
Yeah, I mean, because people were so structured and in their ways, right? And then now that's all been disrupted, right? So and not with the best news, losing jobs, or I don't have the income and things like that, right?
And then the next wave that's coming is going to be our meat supply. And they're predicting within the next 3 weeks that the entire meat supply for the country is going to break down, because where we're seeing the huge outbreaks right now are in processing plants. We have a processing plant in here in St. Joe. We have a large pork processing plant, but and even Tyson, the CEO of Tyson, took out the ad in the New York Times over the weekend warning people. And I think that, okay, we're coming out of COVID, things are starting to reopen, but now our meat supplies cut down. I think it's going to cause a whole new set of issues and problems, that it's not just as simple as flip the switch, let's go back to work. I think it's going to be the rest of the year where we're dealing with offshoots of this.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is yet.
All right. So thanks, Bobbi. So some of the lessons from the other side, right? All right. So don't compare your insides to other people's outsides, right? Your second one, what was the second one? Remind me.
Struggle is real.
Struggle is real. Okay. What's the next lesson?
So typically I move from compare your insides with other people's outsides. The struggle is real. And the third part of that in my opinion, is it takes a village. But it takes a village to raise a human being, not just a child. And I think everybody should have two villages: the village that they're a part of, who they're helping build someone else up, and the people who are part of your village. And I think those can be two separate things. So the village of people that I'm a part of, actually Tommy's in my village. I'm in a closed Facebook mastermind group with about 50 other people. Why they let me stay, I don't know, but Tommy's there, so I try to stay there. I said try. Bad, Bobbi. If I had my bracelet on, I would move it right now. And however, whenever I was going through the last year of being a team leader, where I was really struggling whether this was the right fit. And you have to understand, I walked into a very interesting dynamic in my market center. The team leader had been basically put into, he'd been like, come into town, built the market center from 52 people up to 350. And then he went to jail for a little while. And so then I came into this, basically a God had been in place. And now here's this person. So I had a weird relationship on my market center. It's not like I just took over something that was, do you ever take over a really highly functioning market center? Probably not. However, that's what I walked myself into that. So when I had about a year left as a team leader and I was questioning what I was doing, where I was going, this group that I was a part of, for about 6 weeks, I kept writing this letter of like, here's what I'm dealing with. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And then I kept deleting it because I assumed these people would judge me because, I mean, if you're running an office of 500 people and then you just quit your job, well, you must have failed. You must have been, horrible. And I was going to, disappoint these people. I finally wrote that letter and I finally put it out there. It was like, guys, I'm dealing with these emotions. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know what to do next. And I don't know that you guys do, but I just need to get it out there into the universe. It was my safe place where I could just be me because my husband could only deal with me so much. So I put it out there and some people had some ideas for me. Some people had some good things, good feedback for me. Other people just said, I love you. And what I realized, that's what I needed more than anything. I just needed a virtual hug, essentially. And to this day, about once a week, someone from that group will reach out to me and send a text that just says, hey, Bobbi, I love you. So who's in your village? Who's that person that's just sending you random I love yous? But the other part of that is, whose village are you a part of? Who are you supporting? I support the other people in that group. However, there's another village that I'm a part of. Whenever I was pregnant with my son, there's a website for women called The Bump. And on The Bump, they have birth month message boards. So people that are due in the same month, they get on a message board with other people that are due in the same month with people all across the country. After a while, we moved over to a closed Facebook group. We've been together for almost 8 years now. And we have about 150 women from all over the country in this group. And so when our kids are doing, like weird stuff, like sticking peas up their nose. Hey, is your kid sticking peas up his nose? Oh, great. Mine is too. He's not a total weirdo. He is. And it's okay. It's normal. Or what's this rash? We do a lot of that. Well, in this group, I guess it's actually almost 3 years ago now. Actually, it goes back 5 years ago. One of the little girls in the group was diagnosed with DIPG. It's an inoperable brain tumor that has a 0% survival rate. Mostly children between 5 and 9 are diagnosed with this, and they usually pass away within 9 to 11 months of diagnosis. Less than 1% make it to 2 years. About 500 children a year are diagnosed with this, and there's only $350 a year in government funding to find a cure for DIPG.
Oh boy.
So Zoe's this beautiful little girl. She's diagnosed with it. We immediately become a village around her mom, Casey. This is one of our own. We have a child the exact same age. Any one of us could see this happening to our child. How do we deal with that?
Right.
We start raising funds. We send them to Germany for some experimental trials. We send them to Mexico for some experimental trials. Unfortunately, Zoe didn't make it. She made it 1 day short of 2 years. She was almost at 1%. However, no one survives this. But after Zoe passed, of the 150 of us in the group, 100 of us traveled to Rochester, New York to be at that funeral, to be that village for Casey. And that's what we all need. We need that village that we're a part of, that people give to us, but we need to be a part of someone else's village where we give to them as well. And I think that whenever you're giving and taking from both sides, and it's okay to take, that's where you become a complete human being. That's where it becomes so much easier, because then we're all vulnerable. We're all transparent together. We see the goods, we see the bads, we see everything in between. So that's another one of my lessons from the other side. My mom never had that. My mom wasn't vulnerable. She wasn't transparent. She kept to herself. She didn't have friends. She was just a top producer who sold a lot of real estate.
Right.
That's
and what was, can we make that personal? What was your mom's, so what was her environment? Was it just, actually Maria says in the chat here, which kind of relates to this a little bit, is we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to keep up with more successful brokers, right?
Yes.
So like, was that an environment that your mom probably had a lot of pressure on, just staying on top, right? To like Maria's point here, right? Being that successful person.
Yeah. So when my mom got into real estate, so at one point in time when I was a small child, my mom, dad, and stepmom all worked in a factory together. My mom was a forklift driver. My dad worked the die cutting machine at this cardboard factory, and I forget what my stepmom did. But they would trade me off from one person having custody of me, the other one, I would just wait in the break room in between shifts, and that's what they would do. And my mom left there to go work at a bank. And there was a gentleman that would come through and make these really large deposits at the bank. So my mom struck up a friendship with him, and to come to find out, he was a local real estate broker. Well, he kind of took my mom under his wing and became like a second dad to her. And he taught her how to save up 6 months worth of living expenses so she could get into real estate. And then she just up and quit her bank job. Well, she's a parent, she's got a child, and now she's got to make it or break it, because she's only going to make it 6 months if she doesn't. And so my mom became rookie of the year within the first year, and she quickly rose, and she quickly became the #1 agent in our community, and she was the #1 agent for 15 years. So I think for her, being on top and needing to stay on top fed into that. However, a lot of other agents, only one person can be the top agent in every community. However, you have about, probably 30% of the agents who also want to be #1, and about 10% of those are going to put in the work to be #1. The others, this is a hobby. I don't care what I do. If we look at our numbers, we know that that's, how it is. However, for those 30%, when they start comparing their value based on what they just see the #1 agent doing, whenever we opened our Keller office here in St. Joe, now I was the 500 agents, North Kansas City. Kansas City has about 12,000 agents in it. St. Joe had 240 agents. So before I went to Kansas City, we opened a market center, or a business center, technically, here in St. Joe. And we opened to like 40 agents right out of the gates. It was amazing. We didn't plan on it. However, I started talking with the #1 agent in our community about making the switch, and she eventually did. What I learned during those conversations with her, she was #1 agent in our community. She did not have an admin, and she was doing 92 transactions a year.
Okay. Wow. 92, no admin.
92, no admin. Yeah. It's the light bulb went off. Like, wait a second. That's a lot. Okay. She was staying up until 4 a.m. every day, getting back up at 7 a.m. So when we coached her to hire an admin, we helped her through the process. We did all of that. She sat in my office in a corner and cried and cried and cried for hours, because doing the paperwork, doing that admin side, that was her security blanket. That's what let her know she was a top agent and that she was doing well. She didn't want that taken away from her. Yet her time was best spent generating leads. She was really good at it, but the admin side was her security blanket. And I realized it's not just black and white. It's not just as easy as hiring an admin and just going full steam. There was a lot of self-worth that she was inflicting on herself because she wasn't doing as much.
Yeah.
Instead of using her time in a more efficient manner. That felt lazy to her. And I see a lot of agents do that. That's why they won't. It's not that somebody else can't do the job as well as them. That's what they'll say. No one can ever do it as well as I do.
Right, right.
Someone taught you how to do it. You figured out your own processes, and it might take a little while to get them there. But I think it's the security blanket. It's that someone's taking something away from me, and I'm scared of how I'm going to fill the time with something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And you saw that with the tears, right? Of just, oh man.
I mean, I can't tell you that it was probably a good 10 times that we would just sit on my office floor in a corner and I would hug on her.
Yeah.
Because she was the number 2 agent to my mom. And then when everything happened to my mom, she became the number 1 agent. And I saw so much of my mom and her, and I would just sit and hug her for like an hour and we'd cry it out. Yeah. And she eventually went back to her old company. The other company was just doing this complete mind F of her.
Yeah.
And basically told her how worthless she was, but if you're with us, you're not worthless. And she eventually fed into that.
Sometimes
and now she's number 5 in my market.
Real estate, right? Just sell more real estate. Is sometimes the message. Bobbi, I mean, you're the definition of strength, right? I mean, like I said in the beginning of this conversation, you have a glow to you. I mean, you've been through so much. You've had your own personal experiences. You've had other work experience and stuff. How do you keep yourself so strong? And like, what advice would you give people on this call or in this recording of what does Bobbi do to keep herself strong and her mindset high?
Yep. There's 2 things. And I really want you to hear me on the first one. Okay. It's really, also I cut my finger last night. So I got this weird thing and it's distracted. I tried to cut my finger off last night. Not very fun. I had a bad day. My husband blew out a tire on the interstate going 70 miles an hour. My debit card got hacked and they had to shut me down. And then I cut my finger. So Monday's over.
Yeah.
Can only go up now. The very first thing is, and again, you're going to know this one, you teach others how to treat you. And you do. It's what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce. When your client's texting you at 11 o'clock at night and you're cursing them under your breath, oh, wow, how dare they intrude on my evening, and you respond back to them, you have just reinforced to them that it's okay for them to text you any darn time that they want to. Mm-hmm. My mom was that way. Somebody could reach out on Christmas Eve and have to see a house tonight, and she would drop everything and we would walk out the house and go show a house. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. No one has to buy a house on Christmas Eve. Right. You may be under time obligations. You may be under a job transfer, but you do not have to buy on Christmas Eve, and you can set boundaries. Yeah. This never became more clear to me than when I was pregnant in the hospital with my son about to give birth. And some of my clients reached out and needed to measure for some curtains that day. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, well, I'm hooked up. I've had the epidural. I'm not going anywhere for a while, but I have someone who can help you, who can get you into the house. You can measure for your curtains. They were still 30 days out from closing. We were not rushed at all. And they said, no, Bobbi, it has to be you. And I'm like, it can't be. And I'm fighting with them. And finally, my husband took away the phone and said, she'll get back to you when she has my son. Like he had to be the one to set the boundaries. Right. Funny part of this story is that lady later became my son's preschool teacher. She had children. She knew how this worked. And I never thought anybody could be more bold than that. Right. And I was wrong. Because typically when we think something like that, I've seen everything there is to see in real estate. Right. Something else. Yeah, and it was the day of my mom's funeral. And someone needed to see a house that day. Yeah. And I said, well, see, I kind of got this big thing going on with my mom and the funeral and the family. However, like previously, I've got someone lined up to take care of my business today. Let me connect you with them. And they said, no, it has to be you. And I said, it can't be me. And they said, but Bobbi, you're not going to be at the funeral all day.
Oh my God.
You see? And that's when I learned that I was not having the right expectation conversations with my clients. Right. And what I have learned since then, and I thought I had been having expectation conversations, but obviously I had not. Mm-hmm. Ever since then, I've learned that when I have that expectation conversation, 99% of the people I deal with respect me. The 1% that doesn't, they don't deserve to be in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the expectation conversation look like, Bobbi?
Well, the typical conversation is I'm available to you typically between 8 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. If we're in the middle of negotiating on a contract, I will make myself available to you. If we're in the middle of, something, or if your house is burning down, I had a house burn down on me once, I will reach out to you. However, these are the hours that I operate in between. And
Okay.
this is what works best for me. And this is how it's going to go. And people are like, well, yeah, I don't expect you to work at midnight. And
Yeah,
it's
right.
just that simple of saying, these are my hours, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And
You gotta
then,
use the expectation.
and then when they do send me an email at midnight, even if I'm seeing it, it's not responding until after 8 a.m. the next day, because I've already told them these are my hours. And now we're going to respect that. And I'm going to show you how to respect that. But we all have people in our lives that don't deserve to be in our lives.
Yeah.
The second part of how I stay strong,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of myself as a strong person, but I appreciate that and I get it. And so I'm learning to accept compliments better. It's just, it was. Mine is, your health is your most valuable asset. And if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And so and that includes your mental health. So for me, I have to go running. I don't enjoy running. I'm a marathon runner and I hate running. I think it's the stupidest activity ever. Yet that's how I clear my head. That's how I work through issues that I have going on. So for some people, it's going to be physical activity. For some people, it's going to be journaling. For other people, it's getting together with someone, your best friend, and just talking things out. You need to find what that thing is that's for you to bring yourself that mental health and that mental awareness and everything else. But it's not just as simple as, well, running works for me, it should work for you.
Sure.
You know, I have a Peloton too. And that when I don't work out my stress, actually I get stressed while riding the Peloton because I got the stupid leaderboard over here and I'm trying to pass somebody up. That's not a stress relief for me. That's just a physical activity. Running for me though is a form of stress relief.
Got it.
And actually, I'm gonna add a third thing on. You didn't ask for a third one. I know we have 4 minutes. So I'm gonna do it really, really quick.
Okay.
But I think this is really important as we've been, especially have stay in place and our businesses have suffered. We just did a report in the Kansas City realtors, like 1% has seen an increase in their business, like 87% have seen a significant decrease in their business. And I think that's what most of us are dealing with. So it's really, the most common issue in relationships, the fights revolve around money and lack of communication. Seek first to understand. I will always say that. However, most things go back to money.
Right.
I learned a really important lesson a few years ago. And that was, if you can solve a problem with money, it's not really a problem. And we are in a business where we can go make more money. And that might not be today that we can make more money. And it might be really stressful. And we might have a lot of really bad problems between then and now. However, I can't bring my mom back from the dead. I can't help little Zoe. I couldn't help the team leader that went to jail get out of jail with money. Those were problems that couldn't be solved with money.
Right.
What happened to me in May of 2016, very, very shortened version of this story, it's a funny story, is that the IRS showed up at my doorstep, said I owed money. I did not. What we discovered was my brother-in-law had taken his landscaping business out of his name, put it in his brother's name, and then not paid trust fund taxes for 2 years.
Oh, geez.
Trust fund taxes are the taxes you can't reduce. You have to pay them in full. And we had 30 days to come up with $68,000.
Oh, man.
And
fun stuff.
Yeah, that's fun. Or they were going to freeze my assets and they were going to go digging through my things, which I paid all my taxes, but I don't know any realtor that an audit has ever gone well for.
Right. No.
And we were able, I had to basically rob from my child's college fund, and it cost me $93,000 to come up with the $68,000. However, we did it. And then 2 months later, my basement flooded and I had to come up with another $25,000 overnight. And the stress we felt during that time, I can't even begin to put into words. And dirty, dark, nasty thoughts went running through my head. And then I realized, wait, this is just money. Yeah. I can go make more. Literally, being in real estate, we can make money. I can solve this. It's not going to be fun. I still have a voodoo doll that I stabbed my brother-in-law with. However, it's just money. We can make more in this industry. And so I think that whenever we start feeling the pressures we're feeling right now, we need to remind ourselves, if I can solve a problem with money, it's not truly a problem in the grand scheme of life.
Wow. That is an awesome way of looking at that, Bobbi. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Not always easy. I have to remind myself some days. And
it really is. Well, Bobbi, I mean, I will tell you, you are a symbol of strength. I mean, just hearing you talk and all that you've been through and the way that you're approaching it and your mindset and just your overall attitude is very inspiring. So thank you very much. We appreciate you pouring into us today. Thanks for being vulnerable. Thanks for sharing everything that you did with us. You were awesome. I cannot wait to see you and hug you eventually. Hopefully.
I know, and I'm so sad because I'm supposed to be there May 11th. I'm not giving up my plane tickets. I'm gonna stop Ricky Gervais. It's fine.
Concert. They haven't canceled it yet, so we're pulling for you. So hopefully that happens, guys. Thanks for joining in today. Tomorrow we are going to have George Tully from At Properties. He is going to discuss sustainability and real estate and why it is so important. So be sure to tune in for that as well. Bobbi, thank you so much. Thanks for
Bye,
everyone.
guys. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.